Hey there.
Hey,
Hey.
sorry, let me put it with. There we go. How you doing?
Really good. How are you?
Let me put my. I realised I need to put my
I think
earphones on.
you're slightly echoey.
Am I echoey? Yeah, let me put my earphones on.
I feel like those always tangle no matter how hard you
They
roll
do,
them up
yeah.
nicely.
And I kind of fear that this is as good as we're going to get it because if they had a way of designing these better, they might have already come out with something here that's.
Well, I guess they have, the ones that don't have a string at all.
Can you hear me clearer now?
Yeah, better.
Okay, let me just untangle them
You're
slightly.
just
There we go.
excellent. 1 second. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been pretty well.
Keeping busy? You're enjoying the new year?
Enjoying the new year, yeah. Very, very busy, but we have quite a good balance here. So it's never, it's always quite high pressure, but the hours aren't too bad and that kind of thing. And I'm usually pretty good at switching off on the weekends,
Yeah.
keeping the boundaries defined and all that. So yeah,
Well
so pretty
done.
good.
Look at now, you know how to look after yourself.
Yeah. What about yourself? How have you had it so
Well,
far
I'm
this
like
year?
I've been losing my voice for the last week, so I'm like drinking
Yeah,
tea. I've just got the flu or some such craziness.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but life goes on, right?
Exactly.
Must carry on. No, otherwise been really good as far as work stuff and yeah, busy. But my problem is I get so excited by all the good stuff that I just don't stop working, and then I'm like, oh,
Okay.
I'm sick. Nature's
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
me something. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess.
how's? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I guess on the whole, though, if the problem is getting too excited about good stuff, that's a good place to
I
be.
feel like it's a good place to be, but it
Yeah,
means
yeah,
it's more like deceptive because I just, I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
I don't
No,
notice the signs as early.
yeah, no, for sure. I guess, and you see something can be kind of mounting up. Stress and all that kind of stuff can be mounting up without you really being able to kind of notice it. Yeah.
Yes, the stress expert, totally. Um, how's your podcast?
My podcast. So, with I need to find a new co-host. I was doing it with my flatmate, and he doesn't really have time for it at the moment. So I've transitioned to blogging for now. Um, but yeah, I just need to find I need to find someone who's a good fit. I've got a friend of mine who's also quite into politics, who I think could be interesting. But yeah, for now I'm focusing more on the blogging side of things to get that going. But I will for sure be continuing the podcast.
Eventually, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me remind you a little bit about. Please first tell me how to say your surname because that sounds like a mouthful.
So it's Abecasis.
Abecasis.
If
Abecasis.
and if you're struggling with that and it's easier, you can just say Abecasis.
But that's not the same.
It's not the same, but we haven't done very good branding in my family, so
So it's one or the other.
we've put up with many years of people pronouncing it in various different ways. So we kind of accepted
It's kind of like my name. People will say all sorts of things. So
yeah,
I might just get you to fill in the blanks if I just totally fuck it up.
yeah, we can do that.
Excellent. And then just a reminder, like the podcast is about adversity in general, right? So it's adversity to advantage. And so it's any aspect. It can be a mental health story. It's, it's an organic conversation, but just trying to check in with, what are the challenges that you faced? And then how did you get through them? And then pulling it full circle into, what advice would you give to someone or something like that? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, I think I'm gonna talk about some quite specific, like a period of time. I think it's kind of thing. I think I mentioned it to you at Johnny Benjamin's party, but it was basically a period of time, kind of about a year or something like that, a few years ago, where I basically ended up in a place with like chronic anxiety, and I basically ended up kind of getting myself out of it before I even went to see a therapist, which took far longer than I should have. I should have seen a therapist a lot earlier and stuff like that. But I kind of figured my way out of it eventually after making things a lot more difficult than I should have. And so I kind of I feel like I learned quite a lot about how these things work and how to manage them.
Yeah.
So yeah, does that sound good for you?
Excellent.
And if we talk about if it does branch into other stuff, I can do. But that's the kind of real adversity that I'd say I've had to deal with.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, and of course this isn't live, so if there's any point we get a doorbell or if you're not happy with something, cool. We can just redo sentences or any of that. Yeah?
Okay. In terms of what's behind me, that's quite ugly. Just trying to think. If I go to that wall, maybe I don't have all those sort of like wires and stuff.
Switches.
The only thing is the light is like over my head. If I'm here, is that okay, or is the light a bit?
It looks a little bit like you're in a prison camp, and I'm about to torture you, or that you're like blessed from on high because it's like
it got this glorious light.
Yeah, it's like Jesus is above you or something, which is cool. It looks fine.
Does it look fine? Okay, I'll move it. Let me just bring my chair.
Okay. And then are you, like, I'd love you to just talk about Timewith or anything that you're doing at the moment. Usually at the end, I'll say if people want to connect with you or get in touch, where can they find you?
Okay.
Is that cool for you? You can just say whatever works, social media or the website or whatever. Yeah?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Abecasis?
You're going to go with that
one. I feel like say the other one.
Abecasis.
I think they're both, it's just confusing me to give two versions. Surely there's a right way.
Go for Abecasis.
Abecasis.
Obviously we can do several takes if you don't get it right, but I have confidence in you.
Do you? Okay, let's do it quickly. Let's start before I forget. All right. 1 second. I'm the one that's going to have a coughing fit of some kind. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. Today, I'm really pleased on the end of the line. We've got Seb Abecasis. Have I got that right?
You've got that very right. Correct.
Yes. Oh, that was my big stress. Welcome to the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. And so we've only known each other a short while. We met at sort of at a networking Christmas party and have since talked a bit about both of our stories. So I'm really excited that we've been able to arrange this. So Seb is a growth manager at Timewith. Tell us a bit about Timewith and what, gets you up in the morning. What are you excited about at the moment?
Sure. So Timewith is a platform which connects people with therapists. We were founded about 18 months ago because our founder had a very difficult time himself when looking for a therapist, and it kind of compounded his issues because it just dragged on a lot longer than it really should have. So we've basically built a platform that makes it super easy for you to find someone who is suitable for you. You can also have personalized advice. You can have a one-on-one chat with a care coordinator and basically book a consultation in no time. So we're basically quite a young company, so really, really energized about that and kind of hoping that reaches as many people.
Which is fascinating. And so I'm curious about how it's maybe different from other sort of directories. Like, how does it make it easier for people?
Well, so, directories, they have, a lot of information, but they don't really sort things, in line with what you're looking for and what you need. So they have some basic filters, but they often just sort of list people alphabetically or how, in terms of how far they are away from you. But we give you, a bit more control on what information you can give us. You can give more details. And like I said, there is always someone, a member of our team, who can speak with you and walk you through the process. So it's a lot more personal. And, we think hopefully a lot more kind of comforting rather than sort of being this, faceless directory. So we kind of think we make the process easier, quicker, and just a bit more reassuring, really.
Because it can be pretty scary. I mean, I'm a therapist myself, so I've been on the other end of it. But I've been a client as well, and trying to find the right match. And it isn't always the most qualified person, is it? It's what is it about that, their mannerism, their empathy, their ability to connect with me. And that can often be scary for people. Like, people often come to me for advice and they're like, how do I choose the right one, right? And I often suggest try a few out, get a sense of them, because it's about the match more than anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ultimately about about a relationship. Obviously, in particular cases when you have a specific issue you need addressing, you might want an expert. But yeah, I think the reason it's difficult is in the first place, a lot of people don't really understand their mental health that well. So firstly, you're kind of struggling, what exactly is wrong with me? So you have that whole problem.
Yeah, what am I even looking for?
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with me? And if you don't know that, then you don't know what you're looking for. And then when you get to looking for therapists, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of accrediting bodies, which don't really speak to the client. And so obviously then you have all these different approaches. So the whole thing is a bit of a fudge really often. And then often, you actually find someone, you get in a room with them, and it turns out that you just don't have that connection. And when you're opening up and you're kind of telling stuff that you've never said to anyone in a lot of therapy sessions, you obviously, there's an implication in terms of the kind of person you want to be speaking to, and the kind of you want to feel relaxed around them, and not on edge all the time.
Totally. But then they're the authority as well. So people often feel a bit insecure if they're like, something didn't feel right, but they're the expert. So do I have any right to go, this isn't right for me?
Yeah, that is. I mean, I've even noticed that myself in therapy. You're once you start, you're kind of on your own. You're on your own with, you're in the hands of the therapist. Like, you have 6 sessions. Maybe in some cases you're lucky and you feel immensely better, but often you're kind of on a good path. You're improving. But you don't really know, like, is this what I needed? Is this where to leave it? And obviously responsible therapists will tell you. But, even aside from, the awful possibility of a therapist kind of taking advantage, often you might not know, is this the type of therapy that I needed? Is this kind of really working for me? Should I be shelling out all this money? Because it obviously is expensive. So that's another problem which we're not tackling at the moment, but I think is an important one. Just that whole notion of being, you embark on this voyage of therapy, and then you basically, your best hope is you've had other people that have gone through similar experience.
Who can talk you through it.
Exactly, who can kind of, share their experiences.
Completely. Anyway, we could talk about therapy all day. For me anyway, because I'm just like, I'm fascinated from both ends. And when I get therapy now, my therapist often has to tell me to stop doing the therapy and be the client. And I'm like, oh, right. So it's an ongoing process of learning. Yeah. But hopefully you learn some skills right along the way, so that you don't always, like, I think successful therapy is that you're not in it for the rest of your life, which is what some therapists are like it's just ongoing therapy forever. So I want to get to your interest in this topic in the first place, because I know that you've had some experiences yourself around mental health and adversity. But take us right back for a minute to, like, childhood. What was Seb like as a child? Give us a little bit of context to, what was it like growing up? Do you think the education system, your parents kind of set you up for the real world?
So I grew up in a little bit of a bubble in the south of Spain, so in a sort of expat place called Soto Grande. My dad's from Gibraltar, and so I went to an international school, very nice and sunny, that kind of thing. So never really had to face the challenges of real life for a long time. Then I came to board in England. I was actually kind of all right with that. I was kind of aching to be independent and do that kind of thing. So
how old were you when you boarded?
I was 13.
13, okay, yeah.
And so I guess I was pretty shy, pretty introverted. But I was very, very lucky, if I'm being honest, with the first, even up until now. But my childhood, I had a great childhood. The downside was that, I was pretty lazy. And
you never had to fight for anything.
Well, exactly. And so, I later tried to counter that by sort of putting myself in situations where I had to kind of scrap, so I would it's going to sound ridiculous, but, I would sort of say, I would shut off, when I was studying, doing a master's, I was basically telling my mum, like, no, you're not going to give me any money at all. I'm just going to make this happen. I'm just going to make this year work. I'm going to be self-sufficient. And because I realized that, instead of shouting at me for being shy, you've really got to be smart about the kind of messages that you're sending and kind of how you're building someone's personality. So I kind of realized that if I wanted to change, if I wanted to be a bit more energetic, if I wanted to kind of have more drive, I really needed to kind of make that happen myself. So put myself in situations where it's kind of sink or swim.
But what do you think made you realize that? Like, what made you go, oh, I don't want to do this? Because it sounds like an easy life, right? You can be a bit lazy, you can get a few handouts, you can be all right. Like, what made you go, no, Mom, like, actually, I want to figure this out for myself?
Yeah, I guess so my parents are they don't have too much of an income, so I always knew that I was going to have to fend for myself. So I was kind of like in that balance between not being super wealthy where everything's taken care of, but being that right amount of wealth where I had like a very relaxed childhood, never had to worry about anything. And, you know, but then without, without the kind of stresses. And so I was kind of in that balance. So I realized that I'm lazy, but I don't have life sorted for me. So I need to.
You better sort something out.
Exactly. I need to basically figure out how I can change myself.
Would you say that you had mentors or people that you looked up to at that time that sort of you wanted to be like them, or you were learning something from them?
Not necessarily. Not really. I mean, I had quite a grandfather who was very charismatic and was quite a big figure in my life. But I really wouldn't say that I did. I was more of kind of too introspective for that almost. So I've always been incredibly kind of almost obsessively introspective. So I analyze absolutely everything that I've done. I analyze. I would just lay awake at night, kind of just scanning the last 5 years, just kind of dissecting everything that I'd done, the way that I changed, the way things had happened to me and stuff like that. So I was potentially too kind of caught up in that to be looking at particular people to model myself on. Did
you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have an older sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Who we have a close relationship with, but very different. And I think that's the other thing. I'm quite different to my parents and my sister. So I think yeah, exactly. So that kind of had impact. I was kind of more head in the clouds, introspective. Then sort of whereas my sister was kind of opposite. She'd taken a lot of mannerisms and stuff like that from my close family, whereas I took less of that. Being, I think I was a renowned space cadet.
Is that what we call it?
At school, yeah.
Seb the space cadet.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of staring out the window during class and stuff like that.
Which is great for the imagination and things, isn't it?
Which is good. I kind of realised that I've done a lot of thinking in my life because I'm often not engaged in stuff like that, and so kind of realised that, you know, that's often why they say, you know, space cadets they you know, you develop more creativity and stuff like that, because when you when you do a lot of thinking, you get good at it. When you do a lot of stuff, there's a lot of mileage, you know, that kind of has its impact. So that's something that I feel has been quite important to developing the person I am now. I really value that, like, in that time on my own, like just like walking half an hour back from work without a podcast, without music, without reading.
Really? That
kind of stuff. I just kind of like to have a good hour a day, just not doing anything.
It's almost like a lost art, right?
It is. It's completely lost. And I mean, I think, you know, it's not that counterintuitive, right? I think that a lot of people are aware of it, and, you know, you see there's articles. I mean, there's articles, you know, talking about this stuff online, but you know, a lot of people fall prey to the
busyness, you know, epidemic.
Those tech guys and the sort of busyness, you know, the whole sense of
I'm one of them,
being wired all the time.
Always
you're one of those guilty.
I'm one of those. I'm so guilty. 2 hands up. Totally guilty. Yeah. So I can see that when adversity did hit, you had some habits in place about how you thought through things, or how you fixed things in your own mind, how you were self-sufficient, how you could sort of rely on yourself to sort things out. So talk us through the adversity, the challenges that you faced later on.
Sure. So that kind of mindset of, you know, being intensely analytical, and kind of seeing myself liking to think that I'm independent, actually kind of created some issues for me. So when I was doing a master's and I was taking these prescription drugs, and I started having quite bad side effects. And I think one day in particular was really bad. I had a panic attack, and I had never had anxiety in my life. Like, I was one of those kids. It's like I never worried about anything. Like I said, I grew up in sunny Spain with little to worry about. So never a worrier, not very stressed in exams. Like all that kind of, I tended to do okay with exams without working too hard, that kind of thing.
Did you even know anything though about mental health as a kid, or?
No, I didn't really. I had a cousin who she often suffered from anxiety, and I admit now I kind of used to tell her to get on with it. I used to tell her to get on with it. I didn't judge her about it, but I was just, I was just like, look, it's nothing. Just crack on with it, right? And so I hadn't really had any experience with it at all. And so had this panic attack and kind of hit me quite bad. Like over the course of the next month, I would have certain triggers. So I'd be lying in bed at night, and it just a switch would go. Like I'd be struggling to sleep, a switch would go, and then this motoring would happen in my head. I just this overwhelming sense of panic, and I would start being awake all night, just thinking like, it sounds so dramatic, but I was thinking like, I'm not going to be able to go back to being a functioning member of society, all this kind of thing, because like this had been happening like over a course of like a month, like just non-stop.
Do you think it connected to doing your masters and like pressure that you were putting on yourself
that's what I thought. So after all this happened, I'd obviously stopped taking these prescription drugs, but after this happened, the kind of more intense the more intense like sort of flashback panic attacks kind of kicked off. But then I started having all these like physical symptoms. So I'd have like tingling in my face, like around my nose and stuff like that. And at first I was kind of like, that's weird, but it's fine. But then I would kind of get a bit more uneasy about it. I'd feel a bit anxious, and I would get gradually more stressed about it. And this was kind of as my dissertations were coming up. And so I was kind of like, maybe it's to do with that. And I never really worried, so I was kind of a bit skeptical, but I kind of thought maybe it is to do with that, right? And I had this timeline of September. This was probably about July time. I had this timeline of September when I was going to start my first job. And so I was like, if I'm not sorted by then, like that's going to be absolutely awful. So anyway,
did you keep these symptoms hidden at this point from anyone? Could people notice, or?
No, I don't think people could notice, but it kind of until I started telling people, but I don't think anyone could tell anything that was wrong with me. But it was kind of like heart palpitations, like on a daily basis, like started getting worse and worse and worse. And then I'd have like really, really tight temples. Whenever lights would shine too much in my eyes, I would kind of like start almost triggering. I would have really tight chest, and it just basically started getting worse and worse and worse. And then anyway, the dissertation got handed in, and I thought maybe it's just all going to disappear now amazingly.
Yeah.
Which it didn't, and then I got more stress, and then we're getting to the end of August, and I'm just like, I've literally been, by this point, it'd been like sort of 6 weeks every single day, like from when I woke up to when I went into bed. Like even this is 2 years later, I still feel these symptoms, even though they're kind of a lot more controlled now. But I had a period of like 6 weeks every day, just being like, what is wrong with me? Like feeling anxious pretty much non-stop. Then I finally kind of was like, okay, I need to see a GP about this. He was like, oh, have you considered going to counselling? And I was like, I don't have any problems that I need to speak of, all that kind of thing. Anyway, I was Googling and started Googling anxiety, and they're talking about generalized anxiety disorder. And that talks about incessant worrying. And are you worried about your exams? Or some people are worried about their mortgage and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm not worrying about anything. But so I was kind of felt really alienated by that. We kept on getting kind of
so it didn't feel like your kind of Google research didn't feel like it quite applied?
It didn't apply because I didn't think I was worrying about anything, and I couldn't really find it. I was just like, I was basically thought I had a physical problem.
Sure.
I thought I had I basically was Googling physical, like I was Googling stuff like physical symptom of anxiety without being anxious and stuff like that. And so obviously then you start getting like wondering what the hell were the side effects of this prescription drug? Has this rewired my brain? Start getting really, really worried. And then, going to the GP. And actually before that, I saw a doctor in Spain, and she was just like, and I was like, maybe it's stress to exams, I don't know. And she was like, life's stressful, what can I say?
Ooh.
Which really didn't help things. So then the GP referred me to counselling. I start Googling and was feeling completely lost and alienated. And then anyway, the job starts, and I'm just like, I've got to crack on now. And had
you talk to friends or parents or anyone?
I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want them to worry. I spoke to my cousin about it a lot because she had anxiety problems as well. And then eventually I spoke to a friend of mine. He said a friend of his had something that sounded similar, and he ended up sorting it by going to see an osteopath, which is like a chiropractor. So this kind of fit into my
physical
narrative
illness,
of a physical thing.
Sure.
And so, because my body was getting incredibly tight and cranky, and like I had this just immense pressure from head to toe, and like I was struggling to sleep. I was having like shouting in my dreams. I was kind of having like screaming in my ears and stuff like that, like when it was getting really bad. And so I had it. So anyway, when I would go to see the osteopath, it would release the symptoms, but then it would just be like 2 weeks later, I would have built myself up to the same point again. And so I was basically going through the first few months of my job, just getting through the day, really, like struggling to sleep the night before, and just kind of sitting in meetings, just like on the verge of a panic attack the whole day, like literally from like I would get in the morning and it would be till 5:30 p.m. I would literally going minute by minute, just trying to stay occupied,
holding it together. What was the environment like in that first job? Did it feel like a place where people might have been open about things like this? Or
yeah, no, it was. I was lucky with that. I was also lucky that I was feeling really energized about the job. I was really excited about it. I was doing well. I was impressing people and stuff like that, and so I had a real sense of purpose, which really helped me.
And I just want to highlight, sorry to keep interrupting, because sure. I just want to highlight for the audience how somebody can be totally suffering. Like you're literally saying minute by minute, you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it through and to not let everyone see you completely fall apart. But yet on the cover, so the outside, you're achieving, people are impressed by you, you're doing enough to get by, nobody notices. And I think there's a misconception sometimes that we always just notice somebody freaking out and that's when we intervene, when actually there's a whole other way that this can show up, right? Where you're totally look like you're functioning, but there's all this stuff going on.
Completely. No, it happened recently with a friend of mine. He told me he'd been self-harming and he'd been on medication for anxiety and depression for the 6 years that I've known him. And he was the most, you see him, he's the most like joyful, charming, energetic guy.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah, you're completely right about that.
Yeah, fascinating. So the workplace was okay. You felt pretty lucky. You're continuing to have these symptoms. You're trying to do the physical sort of support for it. Like, how bad did it get? Where did it get you?
Well, I mean, it got so after the sort of the osteopath that was sort of like my last, the last chance saloon. It was always like the last place I had to turn because I didn't think counselling was going to help it. Or therapy was going to help it, and so it got kind of dark where you're just kind of thinking, well, am I going to be able to live a normal life again? You get depressed, you get sort of like, well, life. I never got suicidal or anything, but you start thinking like, well, this is
too
crap.
Much.
This is crap. And so another thing I forgot to mention is that it would kind of get better and. When I would focus on something at work, I could kind of forget about it. But what started triggering me was like I was having this, and I'd get better, and then I would like get triggered by like stuff I ate. If I would have like sugar, I would have like greasy foods and stuff like that. And so I'd basically have a period of maybe 2 weeks where it was slightly better, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm getting out of this. And then I would eat something unhealthy, and then I would basically just literally have a panic attack on the back of something I ate. And this is what really started compounding it, because then I started thinking, okay, so if I just don't eat that, I will be fine. If I don't eat that, I'll be fine. Then I stopped drinking. But then every single time I started doing this, the triggers, I became more and more sensitive to triggers.
Of course, because you're cutting things out, and then when you do introduce them, it sort of sets you off again.
Exactly. So I was thinking, there was one point where I was like, look, if I don't drink, if I don't eat this, if I don't eat that, if I don't eat that, and I'll be fine, right? I guess I'll be fine. But then I was just, literally nothing was setting me off, and then that was bad, and yeah, that was pretty bad. And so that's kind of as bad. That was kind of like the worst of it, right?
But at what point did you transition in your mind from thinking these are only physical symptoms to realizing that you actually had anxiety or that you were going through a psychological issue?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was a conversation with a friend of mine. And I was basically talking through, and I was like, it's physical. I can tell you I'm not anxious. And he was like, look, these physical symptoms that you had, did you have them before this incident, before you've had this first panic attack, before you were taking these? And I was like, no. And he's like, exactly. So there's clearly something underlying. And I just remember the way he phrased it. I was out at a gig with him or something like that, and it kind of just,
Made
had that
sense to you.
realization. Yeah, I had that realization, and that was kind of the first part to kind of getting better and moving forwards.
So talk us through that, because I love the stories of, everyone loves the Disney version of it was really hard and now I'm working on this amazing project and life's amazing and cool, right? Everyone loves that story. But talk me through the middle bit. So you get this realization. What are the first steps that you take to begin to look after yourself?
Well, one thing I mentioned is prior to that, what helped. So I was getting super, super stressed and stuff like that. The one thing I was trying to do was sort of embrace it, and instead of lamenting, like, why did I try those prescription drugs? If only that wouldn't have happened.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Which makes it really difficult to accept. I was kind of just like, and like, am I ever going to live? And obviously, you wake up every morning thinking, are the physical symptoms still there? So before that, I had kind of got better at getting comfortable with the notion of, this could be it. Like, just assume that you're going to go around with these physical symptoms for the rest of your life, and you're just got to make the best of it. So that was kind of exactly, that was the first thing. The other thing is I tried to get energized by it out of the fact, like I mentioned earlier, I never had adversity, and so I've always been quite good at sort of like mental gymnastics in that sense. But I was working really hard to frame it like I was sort of like saying, this is my battle. A lot of people have come from really difficult backgrounds. You were so lucky there. But this is a tough spot you're in, and so these are the opportunities that you have to build a strong resilience and build a strong character. So that used to really get me through as well. That used to really energize me. But ultimately, it wasn't kind of getting rid of these things. So once that happened, I basically just had this realization that all the things, like I said, I had stopped. It was also like exercising hard that would trigger it sometimes. Whenever my body,
it would trigger it, because sometimes people talk about exercise helping, right, when it comes to mental health issues.
So like a light exercise like running would be okay, and I would actually feel better for like half an hour after that, and stuff, or like a couple of hours after that, and kind of help me. But if I had played football and it was a particularly intense game or something like that. I remember I once played it indoors in like a really humid gym, like we were underneath the indoor swimming pool, and then I was fine. Next morning I woke up like with my legs spasming and like just completely overwhelmed by anxiety. Did it affect your work at all when it got worse, or were you always able to kind of keep up appearances? And I think, and this is what you learn, is that when you are at some days, yes, but I think when you are really focused on something, it really does help. And so I wouldn't say I suffered too much. I was definitely not performing to my best, but like I said, I was, everyone was pretty happy and pretty impressed by me. And that was another thing. A lot of people say this is like not advised, but I was also very proud of myself that I never once didn't turn up to work. So a lot of people say, obviously take your mental health sick days and stuff like that, and I absolutely support that. But in my particular case, I was really, really proud of myself for having kind of just kept at it. And
I don't think it's always really the solution, because sometimes you take time off, you're out of routine, your brain just goes, right?
That made it worse. So my weekends were a lot worse, because I was just sitting there like, right, I'm just here with my anxiety.
No distractions.
I'm just here with this, just with this. I kind of call it like a sort of like an awareness. So it wasn't like I was only thinking about the anxiety.
Right.
I was only thinking, like I said, I'm super analytical. So I'd be like walking around and I'd be like, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's, I ate something. Okay, how is that going to affect me? And all that kind of stuff. So all that kind of introspection that I had earlier on.
Trying to be like a scientist on your own mind and body.
Exactly. So all of that was basically just kind of made it really hard for me to snap out of that. And I got so deeply embedded in all this,
It's like obsessive.
I got a million miles deep into the thing that obviously you lose track of the big picture. And so eventually having this conversation kind of made me realize that the way I was living my life, I was like, you're sending signals. I kind of realized, it actually made me learn a lot about how incredibly smart the brain is. Like, I realized that all my behaviors, all of this, like, don't do that, don't eat that, don't drink, all these
negatives behaviors,
right? Yeah, all these negatives, all these things that you're avoiding. I mean, that's symptomatic of someone who's scared, who thinks that they're under attack. And so what I kind of realized, that all these things that I was doing were just sending a signal to my subconscious of like, watch out for a sharp increase in blood pressure.
Yeah.
Because it, because obviously the whole thing started with prescription drugs that I was taking, so my body was very sensitive to like what I was taking in and stuff like that. And so I started realizing that.
So you're like looking for the anxiety in everything.
Exactly, and so I started realizing that the way to get out of this is to live a life, have a set of behaviors that are consistent with someone who's okay. So does someone who's not anxious, do they ruminate for like an hour after they've eaten something? Do they like second guess everything that they're doing on a day-to-day basis? Do they not do this? Do they not do that? Do they change the way they live their life? No. Someone who's absolutely fine and living a healthy life does what they want, and the only things that restrictions are maybe more discipline-based stuff, but they're not making day-to-day things out of fear. They're not making day-to-day decisions. And so I kind of realized, if I can do that, then the rest will follow. Like,
so I live like a healthy person in your habits, in your day-to-day time, create that sort of setup.
Exactly, because you can't impact how you think. You can't impact if you're going to sit there and you're going to think about your anxiety. You can't, help if you're going to ruminate about certain issues and stuff like that. So all you can do, focus on what you can control.
Right.
And so what I could control was turn up to work, keep turning up to work, do my best. Don't be stupid and start eating the greasiest foods and the crappiest foods and drinking loads. But just and this is something my therapist. This was before I even saw a therapist, but she gave me clarity on after. Was like, because I said, why don't I just go and eat, shitloads of greasy foods? So I hope I can say shitloads.
You can, please. That's
great. So why don't I just go and do that? And she said, if you were fine, would you do that? No. So just think about what is a balanced way to be living. And so when I started doing that, everything got a lot better, basically. I don't know, everything just pretty much followed from that, and then you start building confidence. And the way I think about it, this is like, you got it, you're kind of some people are kind of generally quite stable, but often we're like in positive or we're negative or virtuous loops.
Yeah.
And so
depending on life, our environment, exactly. Our predispositions, all of that.
Exactly. And so when I started kind of thinking, well, at least I'm building myself up, at least I'm making less concessions in terms of what I eat, and kind of worrying and I'm starting to live an increasingly more normal life. So it wasn't immediate, but that kind of energized me, and I started noticing that things were better and better and better. And sometimes it was tough because you can't help that at the in the individual instance. If you're saying, okay, I'm just going to eat a burger and chips and have a donut and some ice cream after, without kind of sure. You kind of sit there and you'd be like, okay, well, I've had panic attacks on the back of eating this kind of stuff previously. So, you're kind of a bit nervous. So you've got to kind of confront it, and that kind of.
But really fascinating, the connection between what we put in our bodies and what can be triggered, like the food that we eat, processed sugar, all that stuff that can trigger unhealthy feelings on the inside, but also things like mental health issues.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's really crazy, actually, and that's basically how I got out of it. So I
love this because you've pretty much self-medicated, and I don't mean with medication, but you've figured this out for yourself. But then you mentioned a therapist. So at what point did you kind of go, actually, I want to consolidate or learn about this?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing what I did because I suffered for a lot longer than I would have. But I just, the way that, and this is why I'm kind of engaged with what we're doing Timewith now, is because I didn't want to shell out a bunch of money when I didn't even know what was wrong with me or what I needed.
Yeah.
But I was basically fine. That was in February the year after, so kind of 10 months from the original kind of problem starting. And then the rest of the year I was fine. I had a sort of trigger again in November, but I kind of knew how to get out of it by that point. When I triggered, I was like, okay, you're not going to compromise. Okay, so I already had developed the toolkit, but then it kind of wasn't going away. I was fine, but it was still there and stuff like that. And I was interested to know, can I just eradicate it completely? So I thought, well, let's see a therapist. And I also, by this point, I was working for Timewith, and I was interested in improving myself anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, the first few sessions we started out, and she basically kind of confirmed what I had thought, and she gave me some exercises she told me to do like attention training exercises, because she says that I'm basically my attention was fully rested in, focused on my body, rather than like engaging in the world outside.
Yeah.
And so she would give me exercises like, listening to music lyrics, because I always told her that I love music, but I'm too much of a space cadet to actually listen to what the lyrics are. So she would give me these exercises and also kind of told me to keep meditating. And that's actually the thing that I forgot to mention, was that mindfulness was really, really, really such a help to me, particularly in the dark time, in the really bad times, where I would have a trigger, and usually it would take me a week to get back to sort of like feeling okay and feeling more normal. But when I was really bad, and then I started doing like an hour of meditation a day, so 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening.
Wow. Where did you learn about meditation? Was that your own research, or did you?
I'd actually already started doing it before, because I was just curious about it. I thought maybe I was worried about how sort of erratic my brain can be.
Sure.
So it was a family friend who mentioned Headspace, and so it was Headspace that I started using, and it was actually amazing. Like I went, like I said, it was taking me like from a Monday. So suppose that the trigger would happen on a Sunday. Yeah. It was taking me originally till the following Friday to feel anything like normal. When I started meditating, I started increasing it to like an hour a day. I would be fine by like Tuesday evening, or like by Wednesday. So it literally halved. So it is a real, like I can, like that was really helped me kind of like when it was bad, that kind of really helped me manage the process. So she also gave me exercises around that. And that's pretty much where we've left it on that. So now at any time that I still do suffer from these things. Sometimes I do get triggers and stuff like that. But the main thing is I'm more ease, because I have a clinical explanation for it. I
understand it. Yeah.
I understand what's wrong with me, and I know I've been out of it before, and I basically just know how to monitor my activities to make sure I'm not kind of compounding things again. And I've also got a toolkit in this attention training and mindfulness to kind of get out of it again.
And when did you get comfortable talking openly about all of this? Because you're so open, and there's so much around male conditioning, or around don't show weakness. Like there's so much around that. So what was it for you?
I've actually always been someone who doesn't really share a lot about myself.
Right.
But in this particular instance, I don't know. I was telling everyone.
Okay. I guess you were trying to figure it out, and
maybe I was trying to figure it out. Maybe I didn't feel so much of a stigma, because I thought it was something physical. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So maybe that helped me. Whereas if I would have at least had the perception that it was something more psychological, maybe I would have been more subject to the stigma and a bit more kind of mindful of that.
So you weren't going around saying, I've got anxiety and these are my... It was like, I get this tingling, or I get this thing, and I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, I was calling it like physical anxiety, and I was saying that, I was sometimes feeling depressed and stuff like that, but I think maybe I felt like I had a sort of explanation for it, so that's why I was so kind of comfortable talking about it. So I actually spoke to a lot of people about that, and that was helpful in some ways, because if you think about the osteopath, even though it didn't solve my problem, it did help me.
Relief, yeah.
Particularly around, like, there was one Christmas holiday where it was so bad, and I was like, you think about the food you eat at Christmas. And
all the time you have to ruminate.
And all the time and stuff like that. So it really helped me through that. So that was speaking to a friend. And then obviously the main conversation which gave me the kind of big realization was with another friend of mine. So that was huge. That was really important. And it was kind of out of character, because I don't usually share too much of myself.
And so how do you manage it now? So you've got this toolkit, you've mentioned a few things like mindfulness. Like, is it very preventative? Do you have to do daily routines? Or is it more like you can notice the signs when you're getting to a trigger point? Like, how do you manage it or keep it in check? Yeah, well, I still am much more aware of these things, and I still am a bit more anxious than I need to be. So it still was on my mind sometimes, like when I am eating certain foods and stuff like that. But generally all right, but basically I just make sure that I don't start making these compensatory behaviors. So I'm just like very, very careful to be like I said, in the November, a couple of months before I started seeing the therapist, when I had it came back quite badly, I was just like, exactly what to do. Just meditate and just don't compromise. Don't start acting like there's something wrong with you. Just keep going, keep living as you've been living. And don't allow yourself to sort of slip into a negative cycle. So I've always been quite good at that as well.
like when I'm stressed, I'm just like, I never drink when when I've had a stressful day at work. I never drink because I'm very conscious about like starting a cycle. So that's kind of how I treat it, and helps, I guess, the way that my mind works, that I'm always analyzing what I'm doing. So that probably, even though that caused the issue,
it's like a good thing and a bad thing.
It's quite helpful because I'm very reflective, and so I'm just like, okay, don't do that. That was a bad idea. That's how you start issues. That's how you start going down the same journey that you went on. So that's how I deal with it now, really.
Yeah, so super self-reflective, thinking about your body triggers, but also your mindset. So, how do you compromise or fall into old patterns? And I love that. Like, if people can just remember that line of behaving as if you're totally healthy, then you don't sort of spiral or fall into that sort of the depth of despair.
Exactly. Like, what your subconscious can't be reasoned with logically. So you got to think about what messages you're sending to your subconscious. What are the behaviors that you're taking, and what is that telling your subconscious, and what are the implications of that going to be in the kind of chemicals it releases in your body? In my particular case, it was just cortisol tap almost. As soon as I'd wake up in the morning, the cortisol tap would get turned on and that kind of thing.
Yeah, at the top end of it. Yeah. And so finally, what advice would you give to your younger self who was in the initial stages of symptoms, both physical and mental, and you're on this train of figuring it all out, but what could you have done differently? What advice would you give?
I would have, I think, just gone for medical help earlier. So see a therapist. Maybe it was a pride thing, I don't know, but I just really wasn't accepting that I might have a mental health issue. And so if I just would have gone, and if I would have just gone a lot earlier and just spoken to various therapists and stuff like that, I was obviously conscious of the cost and stuff like that. But instead of, often if you're trying to just don't try and be too independent, get help.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad, if I'm being honest, I'm kind of glad how it panned out, but I wouldn't recommend it in hindsight because I learned a lot about myself. I definitely developed some resilience, but it's just not really advisable to.
Well, you're saying you could have used the backup, and so if somebody's struggling, like, get the backup, and it could be a therapist, but it could be a community, it could be an online chat room, it could be a coach, it could be whatever it might be, to just get it out of your head, because that's what you're doing, is trying to figure it out inside, which is part of the problem, and kind of working it out with someone. And
I think the most important thing is to detach. So I'm quite obsessed with this notion of detachment because I started listening to this Navy SEAL podcast, and he always talks about, like, when you're in a situation when your ego's starts directing your decision, detach. And so definitely, like, what it really takes is detachment, because that's when you get the perspective on, like, how am I living my life? Like, how am I? Am I acting like a normal person right now? Am I acting like someone who is just chronically anxious? And I kind of didn't really realize that, but it was speaking to other people, speaking to my cousin and stuff like that, where when you speak to other people, when you get other perspectives, it helps you kind of get out of yourself.
So the act of speaking to people allows you, or helps you, to detach, and I guess the meditation as well can help you get a bit of distance from the fight or flight reaction.
For sure, yeah, it can help you, and I mean, it's something that you can do yourself as well, and ideally we get better at doing ourselves and kind of analysing ourselves objectively. But the analogy I don't know how good it is, but the analogy I had in my head when I first kind of started realising this was, like, when I used to watch, like, the Biggest Loser shows or the Weight Watcher show, and, like, at the beginning of the episode, the first thing that would happen would be the presenter would come in and they'd say, okay, right, let's see what your weekly diet looks like. And obviously they would just bring in, like, hordes of, like, Coca-Cola, deep fried pizzas, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And so, when you've done that, it's like, well, it's no surprise that
you're massively overweight and unhealthy.
You're overweight, exactly. And so, and in my particular case, well, if you were just being really pedantic about every single decision you're taking, what you eat, how much you're exercising, all that kind of stuff, then you are by definition an anxious person, even if you don't think you're a warrior. And so you're going to end up anxious, and your body's going to end up battling these symptoms.
And so if you could, I know I said finally earlier, but I'm always curious about whether people appreciate their adversity in hindsight. Like, are you almost, like, do you wish you didn't have anxiety? Can you see what it's given to you as far as character and resilience? Like, do you think it's played a part in making you who you are? Is it necessary or useful?
No, I wouldn't change. If I could go back, I actually wouldn't
Really?
have changed it for sure.
Why?
There's sometimes where, I'm not always so perfectly sort of stoic about it. Like,
Of course. Yeah.
there's a lot of the time I fall back into that. But on the whole, I reflect on it positively. I think that it kind of gave me resilience. It made me empathize a lot more with other people, because obviously mental health issues are growing a lot, and it means that you can really help someone out. Like my friend told me that the friend that I said came out and said he'd been depressed and used to self-harm. Like I was the first person one of the first friends of his he told, because he was like, when you were telling me about what was going on with you, and so
he knew that you would get it.
Exactly. So it's helped me become a more empathetic person, and definitely gave me a lot of confidence in myself, in my resilience and stuff like that. Because I'd never been really tested. I didn't know. I was unsure. I didn't really know what I was made of, and whether I had the capability of getting through resilience. I think, and so I do reflect on it positively now. Which is obviously part of why I'm better. I think it's sort of like catch-22 there.
You've got some purpose within it, within the work that you do, within the friendships that you have, and you've like worked it as into part of your life.
Yeah, no, exactly. If I was still lamenting it now, I wouldn't be better. So
that's so good to hear. So if you're in the victim mode of like, oh, I wish, and this shouldn't happen to me, or that person should have done that to me, or whatever, we get stuck in that. It just isn't the way to recovery.
That's in my experience, that's definitely been the case.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for your straight talking vulnerability. If people want to connect with you in some way, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Seb Abecasis, or on Twitter as well. So I'm Seb Abecasis1 on Twitter.
We'll put that in the show notes so people know how to spell it. Yeah.
Good luck to them on that one.
I know, I'll have to research. I'll find it. Seb, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Perfect, Seb.
Great. I thought